some of you are going to be like, ah, you're a kid. I get that. But from Mount Clemens High School, I went over to the Citadel. It's a military college in South Carolina, where I played football and took the military portion of the college. And I graduated and entered the United States Army as a commissioned officer in '91. My experience in the military led me into law enforcement, kind of on a back road way. But one of the things I learned in the military was a lot of skills that were needed to keep people safe. Because I was with a forward deployed unit for the better part of 3 years all over the world. Some places are in existence, some are no longer in existence. But being forward deployed, saw a lot of people, a lot of citizens of those countries that were hurt by being either ill prepared or just succumbing to the ravages of war. And I didn't want to see that here in the United States. And ever since I came back, I've never taken a day for granted here in the United States, because when you start seeing places like Mogadishu, Kenya, Mombasa, and all the ravages of famine and war, you start thinking to yourself, it's a pretty good country, but we can do better, which is why I wanted to do what I do now. I left active duty, I stayed in the reserves, but while I left active duty, I worked for a drug company. Now, I don't know how many people are familiar with Mount Clemens, but when I left the Army and became a drug dealer, it was not a surprise for anybody from Mount Clemens to be a drug dealer. I just did it legally. So I did that for a couple of years. It just wasn't my cup of tea. I was living in Indiana. I left Indiana and came back here to Detroit, the Detroit area. This is where I'm from. My wife, now ex, told me that she was coming back home and with or without me. So I came back home, and because I was in the medical field in the military, I took a job running a family nursing center in Detroit. It's the second largest nursing home in the state of Michigan. And from there, I started consulting in the medical field as far as administration goes. Kind of oddly enough, one of the most significant areas in workplace violence is in the healthcare field. 75% of workplace violence happens in medical facilities. So even way back then, I was, I guess you'd say, a part of it. But I was looking for ways to better secure and keep my staff safe. Working in the civilian world just wasn't cut it for me. I had a calling to get back to public service, so I started at the Sheriff's Office in '98, where I am currently employed. It's the sixth largest policing agency in the state of Michigan. And my job there is to teach all use of force for all patrol deputies, correction deputies, our civilian staff, and anybody the sheriff says, hey, go over there and teach a group of individuals, whether it's self-defense, whether it's firearm safety, whether it's workplace violence, whatever it is. I teach. If it touches on violence, it's in my wheelhouse, and I do it full time. We're one of the only departments that have a training sergeant that does this full time. So I'm very, very blessed. I don't really consider it work, although they do pay me, so I'm not really sure how that works. Although I will tell you that today is my last day as an active employee. So we have what we call a deferred retirement program. So as of tomorrow morning, I'm still going to be working full time. I'll still be active, but I'm technically considered a retired employee that is on active duty until I decide I'm no longer on active duty and I just leave. So pretty happy about that because I'm on the draft program. So I can retire any time, but they still pay me good money, so I like it. One of the other things I do is I teach at the Macomb Criminal Justice Training Center, the Police Academy, Corrections Academy, Fire Academy, anything with public safety. I've been doing that since 1999. So we've evolved in law enforcement training, and we've also brought in on our Public Safety Institute, the civilian side, on how to teach and keep citizens safe. Because one of the core things for law enforcement and firefighters and EMS is the safety of the public. That's what our jobs are. That's what we're supposed to do. So we try to do that in every different facet. So that's kind of how I ended up where I'm at today, and how I ended up here. Accumulation of all of my background kind of led me to where I'm at, and my experiences dealing with it in the nursing home field, dealing with it in the military, and then now teaching it. My goal is simply to keep you guys safe. If you guys can take anything out of here and you're safer walking out that door than when you came in, I consider that a success, and that's all I want. So, that being said, let's talk a little about what OSHA defines as workplace violence. And it's simple. Any act or threat of physical violence, harassment, intimidation, or other threatening, disruptive behavior at the workplace. Okay? Anything that is a physical threat, harassment, emotional abuse, all of that falls under workplace violence. Although workplace violence is one of the most underreported aspects of any statistic. The Department of Labor has recognized that it's underreported. It's about, they estimate between 12 and 25% underreported. Anybody know why businesses or employers would not report workplace violence? Anybody have an idea? Go ahead.
Probably because it.
They don't want to look bad, right?
Yeah,
they don't want to look bad.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't want, we were asked, as a law enforcement officer, you call the police, right? We show up, and we have a call for service number. So it's put with that particular address, 123 Main Street. Well, we had businesses say, hey, listen, can you use the parking lot, which was a common parking lot, right? Like you have the Smith lot or the Jones lot, right? And use that as the address, because we don't want it to go against our workers' comp, right? And, workers' comp may have to go up. We don't want it to reflect negatively on our license if it's a medical facility or if it's a bar, right? So they underreport it. And they ask us to use different addresses. I see it. I'm like, no, I'm not. But businesses will do that because they don't want to add to either workers' comp, any type of licensure or anything like that, or they just don't want to look bad, right? They just don't want to look bad. And that's not a good enough excuse, all right? Because we need to know what's going on so that we can help develop plans to keep it from happening, right? If you stick your head in the sand, it's bound to repeat itself. So we have to look at the stuff that's being reported, what types of categories are considered workplace violence. So we have criminal intent, where there's no relationship to the business, right? We'll say like a clerk at a 7-Eleven gets robbed. That's workplace violence. There's no relationship to the business. It's not a former employee, things like that. It's just somebody coming into Target, stealing things, pushing the security guard down, and taking off. That's workplace violence. That's criminal intent. We have customer or client. They have a legitimate relationship with the business, right? So I have a legitimate relationship. I'm in there. I'm in the auto shop picking up my car, and I disagree with the bill, and I punch the mechanic. That's a workplace violence. I'm in the hospital and I smack one of the nurses. That is workplace violence, but it's a customer or client based. Now, it's still criminal, but we categorize it as a customer or client. Then we have worker on worker. That's one employee or former employee attacking or becoming violent with another employee. That could be a boss. That could be just a coworker. Could be anyone in the business. Again, current or former. And then a personal relationship. They don't have a relationship with the business, but I think my wife is cheating on me with the boss. I have no client business, right? I'm not a part of the company or the business, but I'm gonna go in there and I wanna smack my wife and punch out the boss. That is workplace violence, but it's a personal relationship, okay? This outside of active shooter, this is some of the most dangerous workplace violence there is. Anybody know why? I'll give you a hint. When you start talking about domestic violence, if I am willing to confront my spouse, or boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, or all of them together, if I'm willing to confront somebody who I am supposedly emotionally connected to in a violent manner, in a public forum, what has gone on prior to this, and what level am I willing to take it? I have basically no cares left. All right? I'm trying to be good with my language. I have to apologize if I slip up. Yeah, I'm used to talking to a group of cops where, you know, language is unimportant. So if you're if you see this category, it is very, very close to the end of the rope, the extreme. Okay, and the violence typically is not only personal, it is as far as violence goes, it's on the high end, right? It's not yelling, it's fist flying, it's guns, it's knives, it's things like that. All right, so you have to be aware of that. When we start looking at workplace violence statistics, now statistics I understand can be a little bit misleading, but the Department of Labor and the FBI databases and OSHA, as well as the National Institute of Health, they all gather data on this. Because again, if I can't focus on a problem, I can't focus on a fix. And what they found were the victims of non-fatal workplace violence, 70% were female. 70% were female. Now, take into consideration the healthcare field is 70%, 75% of workplace violence. The healthcare field is predominantly female, correct? Nurses outnumber doctors. Female nurses outnumber male doctors or male nurses. That is changing, but as of right now, 70% were female, 67% were between ages of 25 and 54. Well, that's the workplace, generally, the workplace age group, right? Prior to that, you're still in college, you're still trying to find your way in life, you bounce from job to job, whatever it might be. After 54, you start at around 50. Anybody who's not 50, I'll tell you, at around 50, you start figuring life out a little bit. You go ahead, you know, I'm getting a little older, I should be wiser. Maybe I don't need to be in so many arguments and things like that. 70% worked in the healthcare social assistance industries. This was as of 2018 and 2019 so far, it's 75%. Okay. Some of the most violent acts I've ever seen as a law enforcement officer were in the healthcare and the social assistance industries. The most violent I've ever seen was in the social industry. As a law enforcement officer, without getting into too much detail, They actually passed a law about violence on social workers, particularly in a client's home. They'd taken a child away, and they were actually at the day that the social worker was killed, it was to give the child back. And the mom and the sister brutally murdered this young lady. So we have to pay attention to that, right? If you're in the social industry, social workers, social assistants, you need to pay particular attention to that. 21% require 31 or more days away from work. Again, why do we underreport it? What happens if you have people off of work for so many days? Workers' comp kicks in, things like that, right? Employers' premiums go up, right? I hate to say it, but it boils down to only $1. Okay? 19% involve 3 to 5 days away from work. All right? That's non-lethal, non-fatal. Fatal violence, those that ended in deaths. 82% were male. Men are much more likely to die at the workplace. By the way, fatalities in the workplace in 2010 made up 7% of the workplace violence. It is now at 19%. So, yes. This is nationwide, United States, not worldwide, just the United States. Okay. And again, these were as of 2018. I'm updating them a little bit because data only comes out every 6 months, right? Data comes out 6 months. That's the end of June, so they compile it in July and publish it in August, and here we are. So I'm trying to get the latest numbers, but you know, when you work for the government, you don't have to work very fast. And yes, I'm a part of that, and I appreciate that. So 82% of the fatalities were men. 48% were white. Okay. 69% were between the ages of 25 and 54. Pretty similar, right, to this one. That's the workforce age, generally. That's the majority of workforce age. 31% were in a retail establishment. Retail establishment like store clerks at a convenience store, for robberies, things like that. Okay? It's kind of like not surprising, is it? But we do have to understand what's happening. 23 were performing protective services activities. 23% of the workplace fatalities were police officers or security officers. Okay? 23, so out of every 100 people killed in the United States in workplace violence, 23% were in the security field. That's a large number. Now, we could go on about all kinds of different reasons. That number, for the first 6 months, from the preliminary stuff that I've gathered, has gone up to about 26, almost 27%. Okay. I think as a society, as we devolve, and this is just my personal opinion, but as we devolve, attacks on security officers, loss prevention officers, things like that, are rising. And the 82% men who predominantly are these people. Loss prevention officers are predominantly who? Men, right? So these are also things that we have to understand. You know, if I'm in a retail establishment, yeah, it's a dangerous job. People don't understand that. Oh, well, I work at Speedway, and I work midnights, and I really like it. It gives me flexibility with my kids, and yeah, there's also some inherent dangers. Sometimes people stick their head in the sand, and that's not a good thing. if I go into the job knowing, you know, that there's potential violence, then I'm gonna be more aware, right? And if I'm more aware, I'm gonna see things happen a little earlier, and I'm gonna be able to maybe keep myself safer. All right? When we start looking at who's at risk, the most at-risk individuals is really everybody in every field. However, the most vulnerable are money handlers, bank tellers, retail clerks, right? 7-Eleven, you know, party stores, things like that. Hence the 31% fatalities in the retail field. Delivery passengers, so people like pizza delivery, food delivery, Grubhub, whatever other hubs there are for food, DoorDash, I guess, things like that. Because they're easy targets, all right? People who work alone. Now, money handlers that work alone, that deliver pizza, you start seeing the increased risk. Yeah. Late night, early morning jobs. Those that work what we call the graveyard shift, right? Because there's less activity. Are you more likely to rob a store in broad daylight with 100 customers, or when nobody's there and the clerks all by themselves? That's generally where the violent crime becomes. All right, not always, but that's where most of it happens. And when we talk about early morning, we're talking 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, before most of society is up and around. Medical staff, again, that is 75% of the violence. And a lot of that is in the emergency room and psych wards. Now, you can imagine why that is. All right. I have to deal with somebody who's potentially mentally ill and violent. I arrest them, I put them in handcuffs, I take them to the hospital. I have tools to protect myself, right? I have bulletproof vests, I've got a gun, I've got a taser, I've got all kinds of stuff. And I have a lot of partners who are trained in violence as well. So I take them to the emergency room, you know, and I go, hey doc, here's somebody who's crazy and wants to kill people. Have a nice day. And do nurses and doctors and even security staff, do they carry guns and handcuffs and pepper spray and tasers? No. Although most hospital security departments are trained in how to prevent or stop violence. That's the good news. Because we know this, they have been proactive. I have a meeting next week with one of the major hospital systems because they want their security officers to go armed. Henry Ford has started a program. They are certified law enforcement officers on their hospital campuses. So they carry tasers and handcuffs and all of the things to help control people or stop shootings before the staff gets hurt and other patients get hurt. So by understanding this, they are taking necessary steps. So then we start talking about protective staff. We start talking about security officers, loss prevention, things like that. Again, if you put yourself in front of other people, between somebody who's an innocent person and somebody who's potentially violent, you should understand that there is an inherent risk with that, right? If I go to a call and somebody is beating up their wife and I step between them, I should expect that they might turn their anger on me, right? So the protective staff, they are at risk, but the good news is they understand that. And they usually take steps to keep that to a minimum, or at least the level of violence to a minimum. So that's great. Statistics are great. Kind of gives us a background. But what are some of the actual behaviors that we need to be aware of, at least in the workplace, so that we can combat this, prevent it, get intervention if we need to? As an employer, what says, hey, there's a red flag here? One of them is a negative change in behavior. So Phil's always happy, they always, chatting around. And usually have to say, hey, the water cooler break's only 15 minutes, and it's like an hour. Phil, get back to work. I'm not using me as an example, necessarily, but maybe my boss has said that to me. So next thing you know, I come in and I'm disgruntled. I have a negative behavior. F this place, F the boss, I don't care. Policy violations, multiple policy violations in a short amount of time, okay? Where you end up disciplining somebody because of a negative behavior. And what happens is, that's a red flag. Why did they become so negative? Is it something at home? Is it something at work? Is it both? We need to be aware. Now, when we go through this list, I want you to understand, now, there's not one thing that is an absolute predictor, but all of them should raise a flag and make you ask the question. I don't know what the answer is, but I do have to ask the question and find the answer. That's what these behaviors indicate. An increased level of passive aggression. If I start down the road of aggression, it starts with passive aggressive and ends with absolute aggression. Okay? I told somebody that I was working with as a trainer. I teach people, and I tell them, listen, you're a nice kid, but you have to learn to become violent, at least for our job, in the right way. I had to learn how to become violent because I was not a violent person. Even though I came out of the military where violence was an everyday part of life, it was always overseas. Here, it's different. So if somebody knows how to be violent with aggression, starting with passive aggression, they can become very violent quickly. So we have to pay attention to that. Somebody's just, man, why are they always chipping away? That chipping can become swinging a hammer. Okay? We're not just tapping with a small hammer, now we're swinging with a sledgehammer. You gotta ask the question. Sense of hopelessness. Why bother? I'm at a dead-end job, nobody cares. I'll be dead here soon anyways. Well, we've seen with those that have mental illness, if they're looking to maybe end it, and they have a sense of hopelessness, the bottom line is, why not go out with style? That's what we're seeing in so many of our youths that are active shooters. They want to commit suicide, but how am I going to do it so everybody remembers me? Here's how. All right, unreasonable demands. They start coming in, hey, you're late to work, what's going on? We've noticed a pattern here. And they get passive aggressive, and change my start time. You better change my start time if you know what's good for you. Oh, unreasonable demands. No, the workplace we start at 8 o'clock, not 9, and you do that, right? Unreasonable demands. Verbal threats. You're going to do this, or you'll regret it. Okay? Things along the lines of even passive aggressive verbal threats. Things that you better do this, or if you know what's good for you. I got passed over for promotion. You better rethink this, or bad things happen to good people. Veiled threats or even explicit threats. Hey, you better rethink it or I'll break your leg. Those are things you need to take seriously. If somebody verbalizes it, that means it's on their mind, right? As a society, we tend to lose our brain-mouth filter at times. And we celebrate that as well. We're not politically correct. Good for you. You don't fall victim to political correctness. Yeah, well, sometimes you just need to keep it close. All right? Because this isn't a joking matter anymore. Things around the water cooler 30 years ago were different than they are today. All right? So, verbal threats, increased absenteeism. Again, policy violations, increased policy violations. Somebody who's been a model employee is now showing up late or not at all. The question is why? Now, it could be they're having, difficulty at home, or their loved one is sick and they have to take time off of work. But, as an employer, you need to know about that. You need to know your people so that you can be empathetic. Set up a card or something, but if there's for no reason, maybe they're starting down that path of hopelessness. Why do I gotta go to work every day? Nothing matters anyways, right? We have to ask the questions. We talk about repeated violations of policies. Start stacking up, production violations or insubordination. Once you start going insubordination, that starts increasing the risk. Now, we had an employee at work one time, and now you gotta understand, when you start talking about people who carry guns for a living, when people start getting repeated violations and threats against coworkers, you have to take that seriously. He started making threats against the administrative staff. I'll kill the sheriff, I'll kill the captains, and so we had obviously took that serious. It started with violations at work, increased absenteeism, moved to verbal threats. Took his gun, we physically committed him to the hospital under a psychiatric hold, because law enforcement can do that. So we did, turned out he had a brain tumor. They operated, it was cancerous. They removed the tumor, the cancer was still there, and it was going to spread, but the relief off of the brain from the tumor, he was a completely different individual after the surgery. He never came back to work because he was too sick, but he was back to being a pleasant, very friendly individual who had no idea why he was the way he was. And it was because of a medical issue. But again, we're not going to know that, right? And I'm not saying you have to get into the medical histories, but there may be a medical reason for it. There may be an emotional reason for it. But we have to ask the question and then figure out the answer. Start talking about severe mood swings. That can indicate a lot of things, emotional instability, things like that. But you have to ask the question, why are they having mood swings? Is it something at work? They come in happy. As soon as they see employee number 3, they get very upset. Did something happen between them that nobody's reporting? Or does that employee remind them of their dad who was abusive? I don't know. We have to ask the question. Explosive outbursts of anger or rage, and you have to look at it without provocation. Okay? If it's in response to a violent act against them, that's with provocation. And I'm not saying it's necessarily a good thing, but it's not necessarily an indicator that they're going to be violent in the future. But if I talk of violence, unprovoked, unnecessary violence, my mind is thinking that, I'm speaking it, where does it end? We have to ask those questions. Now, how many people have ever been in the military before? Anybody in service? In service? What branch? What's that?
Navy.
Navy. Well, thank you for your service. Navy, Uber drivers for the Marines? Just kidding. Good guys. But if you have in your workplace a couple of former Marines who are talking about their deployments to Fallujah, very violent area, and they're just talking around the lunch table and, oh dude, I had to roll this grenade into a door and it blew up like 5 people and we shot them. Yeah, screw them, that'll teach them. Well, it might sound to most people pretty angry, pretty violent. But when when that's particularly combat vets are talking amongst themselves, a lot of it is the decompression, right? The decompression of what we've seen. Of, you know, because they're not going to talk to most people unless they've been what we call downrange. Because people don't understand it. So it's a little bit different. It might just be their way of kind of letting off the steam, kind of keep an eye on it, but at the same time, it's way in the past, and they've not had any episodes of violence. Okay, and it's between two people who are there to basically console each other. So you have to look at it in context. I'm talking about without provocation, without justification, just violence. Dude, you're at the bar, I just punch this guy in the head. Yeah, that might be a problem. All right. Start talking about suicidal thoughts, suicidal tendencies. All right. We have to ask ourselves why. Maybe it's clinical depression. All right. How many people have an EAP program? How many people think they do but aren't sure? Everybody should know if you have one, and if you don't have one, you should have one. Okay? It's one of the most underutilized benefits any company can provide. Yes, sir.
What's the EAP program?
Employee Assistance Program. So it's like a hotline you call and you're out on the truck and I don't know what to do. Oh, well, you know, you're an employee for, you know, the bank. Well, you know, I can refer you to a couple of providers. Do you want to talk right now? You know, it's basically an emotional support system. Okay? It's where people can call and either report stuff or they can call and talk about problems. Could be financial. My wife wants to leave me because she says I'm in a dead-end job and I don't know what to do. It's kind of like mental health counselors. Or they'll refer you to mental health counselors. They'll refer you to financial advisors. They'll refer you to, they have all the information at the tip of their fingers. Okay? So, if somebody's suicidal, we may need to refer them. We may need to call and have them committed. But that's on the extreme end. But we have to be aware that these are things that we need to open our eyes to, that we have had them closed for so long on, that we have to pry them open to see this. Or what we end up with is what we had last weekend with 2 mass shootings. Okay? That's on the very extreme end of it, but we know that that's happening more frequently. Talk about paranoia. If somebody's paranoid, we're starting down that track. Escalation of domestic problems into the workplace. Somebody comes in and says, my husband is beating me every night for the littlest things. I mean, he used to beat me when I screwed up, but now it's on everything. We have problems. And now as an employer, you have to take action. You have to do something. As a concerned person, you have to protect each other. Now, if it escalates into the workplace and somebody comes into the workplace to beat their significant other, now we have very, very high levels of violence. And we needed to pay attention to it back then. All right, but we certainly got to do something now. Empathy with people committing violence. And, you know, I don't really agree with the Dayton shooter, but I can understand his points. And, you know, I guess if I were in that situation, I'd do the same thing. Except I probably would kill more people. I think that those statements may kind of raise some questions. Yeah. You might want to put your thinking hat on real quick. Go, wait a minute. He empathizes with somebody who's committed extreme violence. He's thinking that acting is the next step. We're to that point. We need to start thinking about what's going on. All right? Now, I don't know if you saw on the news the other day, actually it was yesterday, there was an employee of our Armada School District that was arrested for making terroristic threats. He told a coworker around the water cooler that he had a problem with a business. And he goes, I should just go in there and make you 47 and 12 rounds and take care of business. The employee went, oh, yeah. Well, those guys, I gotta go. Hey, yeah, you got a problem. And there was a problem. Okay? Now the employee's like, nah, I was just kidding. Were you just kidding? For legal purposes, or were you really just kidding? It's a fine line, and the difficulty of reporting that is simply, he's my friend, and I think he's kidding. I think he's kidding. Well, we don't know. And that's why we have to be vigilant with stuff like this. Start talking about unsolicited comments about firearms, weapons, violent crimes, somebody walking up, hey, I bought this new shotgun. I don't know if you've heard of it yet, but it's, a Caltech, some, whatever. And you go, okay, yeah, I can kill like 100 people in 5 seconds. Where did that come from? Like, why is this talk all of a sudden? We need to start preparing for, what do we do in this case? Right? We need to start looking at that. And what we need to do is we need to start educating employees. We have to be upfront about this. We can't say, oh, well, I really want to talk to people about it because it might make them do it. Right? Like the old thought about suicide. I'm one of our crisis negotiators. I'm one of our lead negotiators. I've been doing it for probably 16 years now. I was on the SWAT team. I'm a little old, a little less fit than I was, so I figured I'd use my brain, right, and talk to people rather than, start carrying all that heavy gear and do that for the kids. But I'm a negotiator. When I get somebody who's a barricaded gunman who's suicidal, what do you think the first thing I ask them is? Well, actually, second thing. First thing is, hey, why don't you put the gun down and come on out? And let's talk out here where we can talk person to person. And when they go, no, what do you think the second question I ask them is? Are you going to kill yourself? Flat out. If it's already in their mind, I'm not planting an idea. You will not plant an idea by talking to your staff about workplace violence. They're either going to have it in their mind or they're not. And we need to educate those that don't understand what's going on, and we need to teach them about safety. And we also have to teach them about what is acceptable and what is not acceptable behavior. How many times do we have workplace sexual harassment seminars where you have to say, listen, if it's not yours, don't touch it, right? We have to do that pretty much every year or some regular basis. Yet we don't educate about this. And in those seminars we say, this is what's acceptable and this is what's not, right? Well, we need to do the same thing with workplace violence. Listen, talk like this is not acceptable. This is allowable, this is not. Hey, if you're talking about your hunting trip with 5 guys from work who all were on that hunting trip with you, and you shot a deer and now you're feeding your family, whether you're pro or against hunting is irrelevant. They're not talking about violence. They're talking about illegal hunting activity that they all went on, right? So is that acceptable behavior or is it not? That's something your company has to decide. Then you have to tell them, what do you do if you witness workplace violence? You need to report it. Who do you report it to? When do you report it? How do you report it? You have to teach people, or else they're going to be looking at you going, I didn't know what to do. It's incumbent on the employers to teach the employees what they need to do. Now, my OSHA and OSHA have always said, you have to teach your employees what to do for the most common areas they're going to run into. For law enforcement, we We have to have legal refreshers. We have to have driving training. Like every year, I have to go through a driver's training course. I do it every day. It's the most prevalent task I do, right? The most prevalent things you have to train your employees on. Workplace violence is one of them, all right? Who do they call? How do they get a hold of them? Do I text? Do I phone call? Do I get on the intercom and go, hey, we have workplace violence in pod number 3. What do we do? You have to develop policies and procedures about workplace violence, and they have to be realistic. Okay? It has to be realistic and it has to be workable. Now, some of the best ways to get workable policies and procedures, in my opinion, is to not have what I call unmarried marriage counselors make them. I've never done this job, but I'm going to tell you how you should. You have a committee of employees who have a diverse background within the company because they're going to pose you challenges. And if your policy addresses those challenges, you've got a realistic policy. Right? You have to secure the workplace. Today, more than ever, we have to secure the workplace. You have to have cameras. You have to have locking doors. You have to have security if your company, is able to have it. All right. These are all things that, if it's predictable, you have to have measures in place. That's what my OSHA and OSHA tell us. So, you have to secure the workplace. It could be something as simple as locking doors and having key card access. And it tells you everybody who's swiped in and out. Now at our place, we have those. We have them for pretty much everything. I run our gun range, I run our armory. I have all kinds of weapons in my armory. Things that law enforcement in general aren't allowed to have unless you're on specialized units. I can tell you exactly who went into my armory at any given time, based on the key code. All right? And if they fire me, they just go to the computer and go, boop, and I de-access to everything. Even if I do still have my card. Okay, there are systems out there. Some very complex, some not so complex. Okay, but it's up to the employer to have those systems in place and workable. All right? We gotta have safe places for money drops if people are handling money, and procedures for that. Now, 7-Eleven or a lot of these party stores, you'll see cashier has no more than $100 at any time. So their policy is anytime you get more than $100, you put it in the safe, and it like automatically puts it in or counts it or whatever the new safes do. Okay, so they have policies for that, but you have to enforce those policies as well. But you have to have a safe place. If you're a delivery driver or your staff is delivery driving, you're not going to carry more than $20 in change. Maybe that's what the policy is. At any time an order comes in, okay, you're gonna pay with credit card. Well, I was gonna pay cash when he gets here. Okay, our policy is the driver, can't make change for anything more than the 20. Okay, we're good. Yeah, okay. Because now you're putting people on notice. If I order a pizza so that I can rob the pizza guy of all of his tip money, and I order it, they tell me, listen, he can't make change more than the $20 bill because he will not have more than, he won't carry more than that much money. Am I going to call somebody maybe who does? I cancel my order, I only have a 50. Call the next place. Now, I don't want to say pass the buck, but you're doing your job of keeping your employees safe. Okay? So you have to have realistic policies and a safe handling practice. Then you have to equip staff with communication abilities. How are they going to communicate? We'll go to the most extreme situation on a mass shooting. How are they going to notify somebody? Do we have intercoms? Do we have cell phones? Do we have radios? What is it and how are we going to establish communications. You have to do that per company, right? I can't say you have to issue everybody a radio so that they can get on the radio, because your budget may not support that. It may support extensive video and audio. I don't know. Each company has to make that decision, but they have to provide some means of communication. And the means of communication is tough luck, carry your own cell phone. May not cut it anymore. Okay? Intercoms, alert buttons, things like that. Those are communication tools, but you have to consider it. And if you're in a production facility where there's like loud noises and machines are running, and they have ear protection, is a PA system going to be the best way to do business? Now, I was out in Alabama teaching an active shooter course for employees, what to do if an active shooter comes in. It was a production facility. And one of the security managers and the administrative staff, like on the true administrative staff, goes, oh, well, we have a PA that, we announce things on. And that's how we communicate. Okay. Do your employees have earplugs? Oh, well, we allow them to wear headphones, like little earbuds, so they can listen to music, and then we make them wear earmuffs. Okay, so if I get on a microphone or a PA and go, hey, there's an active shooter by exit 1 or door number 1, how many people are going to hear that? And he goes, oh, well, they should hear it. And the staff, what do you think the staff said? We don't want to hear nothing, because we have these earmuffs and then I listen to my radio. Think there's a problem? Again, that's why you have to have somebody who's not a member of marriage counselor on your committee. They had to solve it. They put lights in. Little LED lights. Blue means get out, there's a shooter. Red means there's a fire, get out. Yellow is a chemical spill. And they have somebody walking around with a controller. The safety guy with the controller, the one that said, oh, they can hear. Same guy with the push button. But you have to have the communication abilities. How are you going to do it? It has to be realistic, right? You have to allow them to not enter an area they don't feel safe. You should not tell somebody, listen, I don't care that you don't feel comfortable in that office because, Johnny beat you up last year. You have to go with it. That's where your new desk is. Get over it. Well, it's not the way to do business. You're not going to get very much production out of that employee area. If they don't feel comfortable, you got to give them a way to say, I'm not comfortable. Now, the flip side of that is, if they're the employee that says, I'm uncomfortable doing, in any area other than my cubicle listening to Pandora while playing on Facebook all day long, we have a different issue. But you have to address that through your policies that deal with job responsibilities. Okay? If you conduct effective background checks, not these background checks like I've seen, hey, did you do anything wrong in your life? No. Do you promise? I really promise. Do you pinky swear? I swear. Okay, you're hired. Those are not effective. We have to do background checks. With law enforcement, is obviously we do a very thorough background check. We have to. But you have to do a thorough background for each level of staff. Now, as the staff needs change and you hire people in different positions, those backgrounds may have to change. You may have to ask for financial information. If you hire somebody who's handling money, you may have to ask for financial backgrounds. And you can, but it has to be effective. All right? You have to conduct reviews on policies and procedures. You got to update them every now and again. When I started at work, our policy procedure manual was like this. I think it said, don't do dumb stuff. Actually, different wording, but essentially, don't do dumb stuff. Don't arrest anybody who's not supposed to be arrested. Don't hit anybody who's not supposed to be hit. Thank you for working here. Now, our policy manual is like this thick, like 2 volumes. Because we understand we gotta review things and we have to update as needed. Every year is probably a good way to do business. All right, at least once a year, or as things change. How many people have policies that are dated 1993? All right, you see them. Boss has changed, the company name has changed, the address has changed, you know, the production has changed. You no longer make car parts, you make razor parts or whatever. I mean, things change. You update your policies. You have to have updated periodic risk assessments. Have somebody come in, or if your company has a safety officer who does risk assessments and does them effectively, have them come around periodically. Oh, that camera's on. The doors look locked. I was teaching at a facility down the street here in Warren, and they said, "Oh, yeah, we control access, and nobody comes in unless we can see them on camera, and they have to show their ID, and then they sign in electronically, and then we let them in." And I go, "Okay, so how am I standing here right now?" They go, "Well, I don't know. Well, the doors were locked. I just came in, and I was instructing the class similar to this. So now I'm here. I'm the teacher." And they're like, "Oh, well, the door's broke." "Okay, how long's it been broke?" "Oh, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks." "And did you see me come in?" "Oh, the camera's broke too." Is that effective risk assessment? No. So you have to have periodic reviews, check things like that. If it's supposed to work, make it work. If it's not supposed to work, then don't worry about it. But at least conduct periodic reviews and assessments by somebody who's qualified to do it. Again, not an unmarried marriage counselor. All right. No offense to firefighters. Anybody know firefighters? You know this, they are service rivalry, right? Between police and fire. I mean, I love my second responders, but, you know, they always wait for us to make it safe before they come rescue the cat. But no offense to them, but I certainly don't want a firefighter coming around trying to tell my company how to secure a door and what camera systems we need or door accesses we need. I do not want a police officer coming around telling me where to store hazardous chemicals. I want a firefighter for that, or a hazmat team member or something. You know, somebody other than a knuckle-dragging mouth breather. Okay? That's law enforcement. We do other things. Have somebody who specializes in that area do it. There are plenty of people out there that do it. Get somebody who's professional in that area. We want to give people a way to report issues. EAP is one of them. The Employee Assistance Program. They can call the number, even if they want to remain anonymous, and say, "Hey, listen, you know, Joey hit Susie today at work outside the water cooler, and it wasn't on camera. And I think that's wrong, and somebody should do something." Well, then they can trigger a response. It may be through informal leaders. We all have informal leaders at our workplace. Those that don't hold the title of manager, supervisor, or boss, but somebody that everybody goes to when the chips are down and talk to. There's got to be formal and informal communications. Formal is in a policy, you know, notify your manager. Your manager will immediately notify human resources, whatever. Then you have your informal. "Hey, listen, Joey, if anybody brings this to you, you need to let us know right away." Informal and formal. You're going to get information from both, but everybody needs to know how to do that. If they say, "Well, tell the supervisor," "Well, which one?" Because I've had people come to me in my workplace and say, "Listen, boss, I think something's wrong, and I don't know who to tell." I go, "Well, did you tell your shift supervisor?" That's your first stop. We're a paramilitary organization, so your immediate boss is who you should tell. They go, yeah, I told them. They just looked at me and said, don't worry about it. No, that's a big deal. You need to worry about it. And then, I took care of it from there, but you have to have a way to report stuff. And again, it's going to be company specific because I can't tell you if you have a, $100,000 or 100,000 employee business that, you call the CEO directly. But if you have a 3-person business, well, you probably can call the boss directly, right? So we have to have those provisions. You have to train supervisors on recognizing workplace violence indicators. You need to have a separate meeting with managers and say, listen, this is what we need to look for. When you're out on the floor, or you're in the office, or you're making your rounds, keep an eye on this, pay attention to this, listen for this. And if you hear any of it or see any of it, you need to report it, or you need to do something. And this is your role, and if you can't handle it, this is your boss's role. All right? And you have to take all complaints seriously. All of them have to be taken absolutely serious. Now, and I don't like to go back to stories through my career, but it might help a little bit. The one guy that came to me and said, listen, I told my shift boss, but he didn't seem to care, didn't want to do anything. And you're a guy I trust. Because he said, hey, can we meet, and can we meet in the armory? Meaning no recording devices, no phones, no access to anybody but me. So I need a complete secret meeting. Okay, come on. And he says, my best friend told me he did X, Y, and Z. And I think he's kidding, but I'm not sure. And I said, well, that's a criminal act. Did you tell your shift boss? And he said, yes. They didn't do anything? Nope. I said, well, let me do something. And we immediately terminated and investigated the employee. It was a pretty serious allegation. Turns out he was just kidding. He was just joking around. But in our line of work, you can't joke about that type of activity. So he was still terminated, and that was just the way it was. But it has to be taken seriously. Even if somebody's like a kid, you know what? You have to err on the side of caution. In today's world, especially, the custodian in Armada, he says he was kidding about shooting up the business. Yeah, well, not something to kid about. Words have repercussions. We have to take them seriously. All right, we have to create an emergency action plan. Now, when you start creating emergency action plans, they have to be encompassing of multiple areas. When you look at, what do I do in the event of an emergency? You have to look at, all right, in a fire, we evacuate. In an active shooter, we evacuate. In a chemical spill, if you're in a factory, a production facility, we evacuate. So now you're encompassing responses for several issues all at once. And why would we want to do that? Tell you, you don't understand? Hicks law tells us the more options we have, the more time it takes us to decide what to do. So if I say you pick between door number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, on this scenario, you're going to be like, well, what's the pros and cons of door 1, 2? Takes you longer to decide. But if I say door number 1 or door number 1, that's a pretty easy choice, right? So we need to have policies, and we need to have action plans that encompass as many things under one thing as possible. Simplify it for the employees. Simplify it for management. Okay? And then you have to practice that plan. How many people practice fire drills? Periodically. Okay? We have to do it once a quarter with 1,200 inmates. Yeah, that's not easy. But every 3 months we do it. We're pretty good at it. The inmates are pretty good at it too. They're like, oh yeah, I know where to go. We're gonna go here. Got it. All right? But you have to practice the plan, or else it's no good. Because that paper, that policy, that plan, turns into 1993, and here we are 2019. Okay? All the exits have changed, everything else. You have to train employees in first aid, CPR, and Stop the Bleed. Stop the Bleed is a new program, particularly for active shooters, but also workplace injuries. How to put tourniquets on, how to put pressure dressings on, things like that. In a production facility, I would absolutely recommend it. Okay? Simply because, yeah, we have to worry about being prepared for an active shooter, but more likely scenario is somebody gets hurt on the job and a finger starts bleeding pretty bad, like because it's gone, or something gets impaled in somebody. We need to stop the bleeding. People have heart attacks on the job for a multitude of reasons. We need to be prepared to help them. It's a moral obligation by the company, but it's also getting to be pushed out by MIOSHA, and will soon be a requirement. Okay? Keep that in mind. It will soon be a requirement because it's a foreseeable risk. And AEDs are so prevalent out there, if you don't have one, MIOSHA is going to ask you why. So, they again developed a plan to offer stress counseling. How do we refer people to EAP? Do we bring counselors in? Your EAP plan should have counselors that you can call EAP and they automatically notify counselors to come in. All right? And then when do we do that? Your plan needs to address when we do that. All right? The days of saying, listen, just get over it, Sally, are long gone. And it's a great way to lose employees, valued employees, to ignore things that they need help with. Okay? So the big ones, we need to develop policies regarding weapons in the workplace. I get asked this all the time when I teach active shooters. Well, will my company allow me to have a gun here? I'm a CPO. I don't know, that's your company's policy. I can tell you if the company says no, then it's no. But the company has an obligation to tell people if they're legally allowed to carry a gun or not in that facility. And what to do if you spot one. And not just guns, but what about knives, pepper spray, tasers, anything weapon related? What do we do? Is that an automatic dismissal? Or is it, hey, cover it up, keep it covered next time? I don't know, that's your policy. Develop policies regarding discrimination and harassment. You would think in today's day and age, this would be pretty much self-explanatory. But you would be amazed at how many places I go that go, oh, well, we were thinking about considering a harassment policy, but we just haven't gotten around to it yet. In 2019. They don't have to be too in-depth. It could simply be, no employee will harass another employee. Harassment is defined as blah, 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 blah. Any employee that harasses an employee will be disciplined up to and including termination. Boom, done. Okay, but you have to have something. And you have to tell people, don't do it. You would be amazed at what we have to tell people. Actually, you guys wouldn't be because you see it all the time, right? Did you ever think you would need to see a policy that says, don't harass somebody? But we need them. Then you got to develop policies. We were talking about this earlier, about drug use and alcohol use in the workplace, outside of the workplace. What if I know I have an avid marijuana smoker that works in my production facility? It is legal in the state of Michigan for personal use of marijuana. I am neither for or against it. I really don't care. I really don't. I've never smoked in my life. I don't ever plan to, but it's only because that's my choice. But say somebody else decides, dude, I can't go a day without getting baked. It's their choice. But now what do I need to do in my workplace? If it's off company time, does it matter? I don't know. It depends on your facility. If he gets baked the night before, is his performance going to be changed in the morning when heavy machines are operating and the risk of injury is increased. Each company's got to make their own choices, but you have to make a policy and stick to it. Be consistent, be fair, firm, be fair. All right, we talked about Henry Ford Health Systems. If you work for Henry, does anybody work for Henry Ford Health Systems today?
I used
You do? Are you allowed to smoke? Not at the workplace, but allowed to smoke in general.
If your current employee, new hires can't have tobacco on their system.
Right, new employees are no longer allowed to smoke. Period. Not no longer allowed to smoke on campus. No longer allowed to smoke at all in your own home, on vacation, and they can test for it, can't they?
They can test them.
Now, that particular issue went to the Michigan Supreme Court, and the employer won that. Okay? Because it's a workplace policy. You do not have to work at Henry Ford, right? You could get a job somewhere else if you don't like their policies. Right? Now, you might have a harder time finding work, but the bottom line is the employer can make the policy. Okay? But they have to be firm and fair about it. I can't fire her for smoking and allow you to smoke. Well, here's your write-up. Just don't do it again. And the first time she's caught, she's fired. Okay, that's disparate treatment, and that'll get you in a lot of trouble. Firm and fair. Okay? We have to make sure we understand these things. All right. We've been going just a little over an hour. I know you guys only have a little bit left. You guys want to just go through, or does everybody need a break? I mean, I'm good, but you guys are just here listening to what's going on, so we'll go through. We'll finish up. All right, so, oh crap. We just had somebody walk into our facility, beat his wife up, and punch the boss that tried to interview. What do we do? What do we do now? We need to get medical help. We need to call the police. All right? You need to report it to the police. What if they just, two employees push each other around the water cooler and no punches are thrown, but they're yelling and screaming at each other and threatening each other? Call the police. It sucks. But you need to get it documented. Or you have a very good system in place to document incidents. Okay? And not like how I used to document things in the military. Hey boss, yeah, that happened. Okay. And that's it. Put it on paper. If you have a paper trail and it's no physical violence, but it's maybe verbal threats, and you don't feel comfortable calling the police, that's fine. But you have to document it. And then on your steps, you have to report it. You have to document it so that any future behavior or even that current behavior can be dealt with appropriately. Because what do they say, right? If it's not on paper, what? It didn't happen. And you will go to an arbitrator. If you're unionized, you will go to an arbitrator, and if you're not, you'll go to a court of law, and they're going to say, where is your paperwork that says this employee pushed another employee? You go, oh, well, everybody knows it. Not good enough. You have to document it. You got to encourage all employees to discuss the incident. That way, you can see how to avoid it. Listen, guys got into it over a Trump rally in Texas. And that's what precipitated all of this. How about we do this, guys? No more political talk or whatever. It's evolving. You have to understand how to avoid it in the future. Then we start talking about investigate the incident. Now, I told you I work for the Criminal Justice Training Center. So we teach police, fire, EMS. Our instructors are all very well versed in law enforcement, fire, EMS. We teach detective courses. We teach investigative courses. And there was an allegation made against one of the staff members. And we said, okay, we can investigate this. We got professional investigators. We said, wait a minute, let's have a company come in and do it. An outside company. There are companies that will come in and do this investigation. Because then you have an impartial, thorough investigation. There are companies that do that if you're not comfortable with doing it yourself. When I ran the nursing home, I had to investigate all instances of alleged patient abuse, which thank goodness wasn't very many. Now I thought I knew how to investigate stuff. Started asking questions the first time, and I went, hey, wait a minute. I am way beyond my capabilities. But I do have a phone number to somebody who knows what they're doing. They came in and started investigating. Now you have to pay for it, but again, what is it you're willing to do to learn from the incident, keep it from happening again, and being fair to all employees? And it's not just John doesn't like Bob and is making an allegation. Because we have to protect the innocent employees who are being lied about, right? So we have to understand that too. We have to offer some critical incident debriefing. That's where EAP comes in. Hey, EAP people, we've had a bad incident and I need help. And they'll send people. They'll have professional individuals, grief counselors, and people to debrief that know how to do it. They do it on a daily basis. And then you decide on any changes to policies that need to be done. Hey, we tried it this way, it didn't work. Let's try it this way. And then you have to communicate that to all employees. You have to always put the well-being of your employees first, even if it means having an uncomfortable conversation. Right? I have to sit Bob down and say, listen, you cannot say those things to Susie anymore. She feels like you're harassing her. If you continue to do that, you will be terminated. It's an uncomfortable thing to do. But as an employer, it's incumbent upon you to do that. Even if right after that you go, okay, you got that? You understand that? Yep, okay. I'm going to put this in your file. And in 1 year, we'll readdress it, and I might pull it out. But it's going to be in your file. Got it? Good. All right, hey, we still going golfing later? Even if it's a friend. All right? You never hesitate to, quote-unquote, look into things. You hear around the water cooler, hey man, I didn't want to say anything, but I heard from somebody who heard from somebody that Susie's being harassed about. Nobody will put it on paper. It's still incumbent upon you. That's the informal communication. That's what's very, very important. You have to look into things. You have to have avenues available for honest and open communication with your staff. Your staff needs to feel like they can come to you and talk to you. All right? Now, I get some bosses are just unapproachable, but there better be at least one boss that's not. Because that's the one people are going to go to when the chips are down and are going to say, hey, I need help. We need help. And if it's ignored, the liability goes right back to the company. You have to listen to people. There are communication classes out there that talk about how to deal with employees, how to de-escalate issues, and every one of them should include a listening component. Sometimes people just want to come in and talk, and then they leave better off. We need to train staff on how to de-escalate situations and not escalate them. How does an employer, how does a manager who has somebody start yelling at them handle it? They need to de-escalate that, not escalate it. And if your immediate response is someone says, hey, you know what, I'm tired of you telling me what to do, F you. And the supervisor goes, you know what, F me, no F you. We call that a limbic response. That is an emotionally driven gut reaction, and we have just skyrocketed that encounter. So you need to teach managers especially how to de-escalate, okay? And then you have to be approachable. You have to be approachable from your staff. They will give you much more information than you ever thought possible if you listen and are approachable. I'm not saying I'm the best at it, because I'm really not, I know that. But I did understand this when I was going through training on being a negotiator. And a lot of people bring a lot of stuff to me. There's a lot of things that go, okay, I didn't need to know that. I really didn't need to know that. Okay, but guess what? That's what was important to them. If it's important to them, it should be important to you. And as a manager, especially, you need to make the time for employees to be able to do that. Okay, that's why you have to be approachable. Now, we've been given a list of questions prior to today that were emailed about, some of the things that people wanted to address. So we're going to cover those real quick to make sure I answer all the questions before we take any other questions from today. And that is, what do you do if you have an office full of one way in and out, and all offices have windows? Now, this goes basically, I believe, to active shooter. Like somebody comes in, I can't get out because there's a gunman in the lobby, and the only way out of this building is the lobby. Unless you have offices with absolutely no outside windows, or you're on the second floor or third floor or above, you always have access to an area to get out. What would that be? The window. If you take a chair, you hit the window, unless it's hurricane glass, you don't live in Miami, you'll break that window. You can get out. Now, that being said, my office does not have an outside window. My office is on the gun range. You can imagine why there's no windows. So, I have only one way in and out. Maybe there's a window on my door. What a lot of schools have done is they've taped off or they've tiled off basically a red or blue line. You stay this side of the blue line and you're out of sight. And that's just a visual reminder of where to be and how to stay out of line of sight for anybody looking to do harm. You lock the door, call 911, and do the best you can. Now, there's a whole class with active shooter that addresses this specifically, and how to defend yourself if needed and all the other stuff. But you stay out of the way, put something down there. Like I said, schools are tiling. So elementary schools, right? You get kindergartners, first graders. Okay, class, everybody on that side of the blue line. Everybody goes, because you establish that line by looking through the window from the outside. You go, yep, can see you, I can't see you. Here's the line. All right, that's the way to do it. That's actually been very effective. We're finding it very, very effective. Are there any drills or training that we can use to better prepare employees for workplace violence? The manufacturing facility of a little over 600 people. Yes, depending on what type of violence you're talking about. If it's non-firearm mass killing, then this really is what you need to pay attention to. Getting policies and procedures in place, talking to employees, educating employees, making the ability for communications. If you're talking about mass shootings, again, that gets to be a different set of training that is a little more in-depth, a little more detailed, but it goes back to workplace, and you can do that training in the drills, the evacuation drills, the lockdown drills, even the fight drills to a degree. Okay, and there are companies that teach that. There's companies that are more than happy to come in and do that, but essentially that's a separate training issue. But yes, there are training drills. What steps are there to report behaviors of co-workers that could possibly lead to workplace violence? We've talked about it. Establishing EAP, establishing a communications channel directly. Like, this is who you call. Okay, I know at our place, right? So if somebody calls me and I don't do anything about it, or they don't feel comfortable going to me, there's the next step. They can go to our department head. And our policy says, if the department head doesn't do anything about it, call HR. Okay, and I guarantee anybody here work in HR? Okay, great. So if somebody comes to you and says, yes, somebody's threatening me or pushing me or is talking about coming by my house and beating me up, are you gonna do anything about it? What if your boss says, hey, listen, man, let's just keep this under wraps? That doesn't matter. Nope. That's just not gonna happen. HR is designed to take care of human resources. All right. For those in HR, thank you. You guys did an incredible job. And I didn't realize how complex it was until I understood running a company that had an HR department. And I thought, well, thank God I had professionals for that, because I'm not. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'd like to mention for those that are here that are Sterling clients, we have two really robust resource platforms for policies and procedures. We have a way to actually build an employee handbook. These are templates, but a pretty simple tool to use if you're looking to update policies. And some video training for managers, harassment, diversity, managing difficult employees. There's over 200 courses on our platform. And again, sample templates for the policies that Phil mentioned. A zero tolerance drug policy, harassment policy, things like that. So I think that's important. You guys have that resource available.
What is that for?
So we have a Sterling platform. We have
Okay.
two. It's a
Okay.
resource platform that we give access to, complimentary to our clients. So.
I know in Macomb County, regardless if you're a citizen, if you're an employer, or you're part of the public government, right? Some of the government agency, we have, I'm trying to find it, I know I have it at work, a website that you can go on. And I don't have it with me, it must be at work. But you can go on the website and it's got resources for just about everything you can think of. Hey, are you a homeless veteran? Here's a website, here's a number to call. Are you addicted to gambling? Here's a number. And it's all consolidated. And I know that's in Macomb County because I keep it in my work shirt. Because when I go out and somebody comes up to me and says, hey, Dad, I got kicked out, I don't have any money, I don't know where to eat, I don't have a house to live in, I'm near frozen to death, and all I have are flip-flops in this January. Hold on. Oh, let me call this number for you. Let me drive you over here, whatever it might be. The resources are out there. Sterling Group, to refer you to the right places, have that available. Again, that's something that your employees should know about. We put it out to every single deputy out there, not just so that they can have it if they run into anybody that's in need, but if they're in need as well. So keep that in mind. So we talked about what are the current trends. We talked about that already. 9% homicide, workplace violence homicides, trended up to 17 to 18% right now. We're seeing that go up a little bit more. Violence in the workplace, however, is down from 1990, the number of instances, but the level of violence has increased. So instead of seeing 100,000 small incidences, we might be seeing 50,000 bigger instances. So keep in mind, the level of violence has gone up, the number of incidences has gone down. All right. Some of the early warning signs we talked about that, right? Depression, repeated violations, violence without provocation, those types of things. Keep that in mind. Those are all precursors, those are all indicators. What about emotional violence? Many employees experience emotional violence regularly. What are the suggestions to handle emotional violence? Absolutely the same thing. Remember, OSHA defines it as physical, verbal, or harassment. Okay, that falls under the emotional abuse, that falls under the emotional violence, and it's treated in the same way. Okay, if I'm emotionally abusing someone, harassing them, you have a policy in place about workplace violence, it should address that. Violence is violence, whether it's physical or emotional, and it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be handled through your proper procedures, okay? And that can mean possibly terminating the employee, counseling them, whatever it might be, whatever your policy says. But it needs to be addressed, and it can't be get over it, cupcake. Okay, those days are gone. All right. We used to have a very different society, and we have learned that's a great way for you to lose good employees, and it's a great way for your company to suffer financial damages by ignoring problems. Whether it's physical or emotional, it needs to be addressed. Yes, ma'am.
So when you were saying address the problem, what if you don't have the luxury of, say there's a situation where you know that someone's a true problem, they're kind of off the wall, and you don't have the luxury of going through your proper protocol to make things happen. What are your choices
To make things happen, to get that employee terminated?
yeah, without, the repercussions of wrongfully terminating someone?
Wrongfully terminating that employee or yourself getting
That employee. Let's say something happens, this person, is very disruptive in their behavior, they, you counsel them, but then something happens and it just, on a
You
very
start
short
escalating
time
them?
frame, gets way worse. Do you terminate them? What do you do? And then have the fear of them coming back and,
Well, them coming back is always a concern, okay? I don't care if it's a separation. Hey, Phil, thanks for showing up. You're a contract employee for 1 year, and your contract is up as of today, and it's been a pleasure working with you. Thank you very much. Here's a handshake, good luck in the future. There's always the chance, okay?
Right.
Which is why you take security steps.
right,
But sometimes we have to cut somebody loose. We have to look at them and say, I'm sorry, it's not working out. And I understand you have a family to feed. And I understand that you have kids in high school, but you brought this on yourself. It was personal responsibility. And sometimes we have to look somebody in the eye and say, thank you, but no thanks, you're no longer here. Now, that's why I say it's an uncomfortable conversation.
yeah,
Who really wants to say that to somebody?
right.
Most people don't. I'm too nice of a guy. I told you I had to learn how to get violent. I'm not that guy. But when I became an administrator, I had to. And it's just one of those things. If you've gone through counseling and you've gone through the necessary steps and they violate it, it's time to cut them loose. And it happens every day. So.
But if it's in a very short amount of time, like you haven't really done your due diligence with them, but you know they're a threat, you still cut ties with them?
Depending on what your policy is, you can suspend them. Now, you can suspend them with pay. Because if they're in a contract, like a union contract, you've not caused any actual harm. So they can't grieve it, sue you, take you to arbitration because they've not lost money. And then you can do your investigation and then eventually fire them if needed.
You can also request them to get counsel too.
Yep, that can be a part of it.
Definitely suspend them and say, while you're off, you need to come back with, counseling appointment set up and even a fit for duty on their position.
Yeah, a fitness for duty, letter, and it can be your counsel. It can be, you say, you need to go see, so-and-so, and they're gonna do anger management, and you're done with his classes or her classes, you bring the letter, and, we can restore you to your position.
That can be required even if it's not in your policy, just for the safety of your employees.
request of fitness for duty. The state's upheld that. Any other questions?
Okay.
I know that's a little bit longer than we probably anticipated. I do appreciate everybody's time and